You know, industrial standards can seem a little static, like they're written in stone and never change. But the truth is, when they fail to keep up with the real world, the consequences can be pretty serious. Today, we're going to look at how one critical standard for warehouse racking, ANSI MH26.2, just went through a massive evolution, one that's all about closing that dangerous gap between theory and reality.
So let's rewind a bit. Before 2023, the standard was really singular. It was built for one thing, and one thing only: welded wire decking. That was the established world, nice, simple, and straightforward. But, as you know, the modern warehouse has become way more complex, and that's really where our story begins.
Now, before we get any deeper, let's make sure we're all on the same page. See this flat surface here? That's the decking. It sits on the beams and creates the shelf that holds all the weight. Seems simple enough, right? But the science behind how it's rated for safety, well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so let's take a look at the before picture, the 2017 version of the standard. It was a good standard for sure, but as we're about to see, it was really designed for a much simpler world.
Honestly, this one image tells the whole story. The 2017 standard on the left kind of existed in a box, focused only on welded wire and assuming this one ideal type of load. But the 2023 update on the right, it just blows that box wide open, recognizing all sorts of materials and, most importantly, giving us a whole new language for how things are really loaded.
So what was that one ideal assumption the old standard was built on? It was this concept right here, the uniformly distributed load, or UDL. Think of it as the perfect world scenario, where any load you put on the shelf spreads its weight perfectly and evenly across the entire surface.
And this is what that textbook case looks like. It's neat, it's predictable, and it's super easy to calculate. The 2017 standard was designed to test for exactly this situation. The only problem? The floor of a real working warehouse almost never looks this perfect. And you don't have to take my word for it, here it is, a direct quote from the old standard itself. It explicitly says that anything other than that perfect scenario, what it calls concentrated loads, was simply beyond its scope. This was the massive gap between the standard on the page and the reality on the warehouse floor. This brings us right to the problem the industry was facing. The reality of the modern warehouse is just so much more diverse and complex than that old standard could ever handle. I mean, for one thing, it's not just about welded wire anymore, not by a long shot. Today's warehouses use a whole range of materials, from metal bar grating and corrugated steel all the way to solid engineered wood. A safety standard that only talks about one of these just isn't going to cut it.
Clearly, something had to change, and it did. The 2023 update was introduced specifically to bridge this gap, to connect the written standard with the on-the-ground reality of modern operations.
You can see the entire shift just by looking at how the standard's official title changed. It went from the super specific welded wire rack decking to the much broader industrial storage rack decking. That one little change signals a huge move. The standard now covers the full range of materials we use today. But expanding the materials was only half the story. The most powerful, game-changing part of this 2023 update is that it gives us a precise new language to talk about how things are actually loaded onto a deck.
First up is the partially distributed uniform load, or PDUL. Just think about a box or container that doesn't cover the whole shelf. The weight is still uniform, but now it's concentrated in a smaller area. The new standard gives us a way to test and rate decks for this exact, very common scenario.
Then you have line loads. You know those plastic totes that don't have a flat bottom, but instead rest on two narrow runners? The weight gets concentrated in a completely different way, creating these two distinct lines of force. The 2023 standard finally accounts for that.
And finally, we've got the most concentrated type, point loads. This is for those containers that rest on 4 small feet. All of that weight is focused on these tiny little points, creating immense pressure. The old standard just ignored this, but the new one gives us a specific way to test for it.
So, okay, we've got new materials and a whole new language for loads. But why does this precision really matter in the day-to-day operation of a warehouse?
And this is the bottom line, right here. This update was never just about changing some words in a document. It's about making sure the safety rating on a piece of equipment actually reflects how it's used, every single day. It's about shifting from a convenient theory to an engineered reality.
This shift also makes the role of the warehouse manager much clearer.
The standard now gives you the language to analyze your own specific loads, to tell manufacturers exactly what you need, and to make sure the decking you buy is actually rated for the job you're about to give it.
So, take a second and think about your own facility. Are your pallets always perfectly uniform? Do you use containers with feet or runners? See, this new standard isn't just for engineers, it gives you the tools to ask these critical questions about your own operation. It all comes down to this one final, critical question that the new standard forces all of us to ask. Is your equipment's rating based on a textbook ideal, or is it based on your actual operational reality? Because knowing the answer to that, that's the key to a safer warehouse.